All right. Well, welcome back, guys. Hopefully, you guys are able to find our Read Aloud. Are able to join us today. So I'm going to try to keep to this schedule of around 1 p.m. I go live to do a Read Aloud for you guys. It's nice to see some of you guys during Miss Feather's little group group video chat that she did earlier today. So it's nice to see the three of you that decided to join us earlier today. It's nice to see. Sorry if I looked a little blurry because my internet connection is what it is. But my understanding is everybody's connection's a little off lately, so video quality isn't as good as it normally would be. But it was still nice to see those three friends that were with Miss Feather. But we'll start picking up where we left off with the Blackthorn Key. As I recall, we had a lot happen last Friday when I read to you guys. We had Nathaniel Stubb show up at the shop. He's the one that was caught. Him and the three leading guild members of the Apothecaries Guild showed up first because they found out that Benedict Blackthorn had been murdered, and they made it a point with Lord Ashcombe, the King's Warden who's investigating these murders, made it known to him to drive the point home that, this is the fourth apothecary that's been murdered. A fourth member of our guild has been murdered, and you need to start protecting us. And Lord Ashcombe basically said, I am doing the best I can, and I am trying to find these killers. It is number one on my list. It's the King's concern. But we saw again some friction develop as one of the members, I believe it was the guild secretary, Oswin, the guy that back 3 years ago was the one that told the people at Cripplegate that Christopher would be a good candidate for the Apothecaries Guild, and was really the one that recruited Christopher to join them as an apprentice. Found out that Oswin is a Puritan, and as we've had hints that the Puritans overthrew the king, King Charles II, and King Charles II was actually in exile for years, and Lord Ashcombe was his protector at the time, so he also was driven out. When they came back, they started kicking out the Puritans, removing them from positions of power, and we found out Oswin is still a Puritan, and so Lord Ashcombe still doesn't really trust him and is very he is very abrupt with him and kind of threatening toward him as I don't think you are as loyal to the king as you claim to be. So we had that friction going on. We had Nathaniel Stubb show up, and of course, as he's been doing, he immediately made a claim on the Blackthorn shop, saying that Benedict's just been stealing his recipes for years. Christopher kind of goes against what's expected of an apprentice. An apprentice does not speak to the masters unless he is spoken to. Well, he got really defensive for his master and said, Nathaniel, Mr. Stubbs is lying. We've never stole anything, and this isn't your shop. And Oswin kind of backed Christopher, but also reminded Christopher, know your place. This isn't your place to dictate. But we also found out that the guild is basically taking the shop because they're going to go retrieve Benedict Blackthorn's last will and testament to determine who is getting the shop. And basically they tell Christopher, we will deal with your future of your apprenticeship at a later date, but you have to leave. So Christopher is being kicked out of the shop, which has been his home for the last 3 years since he left the Cripplegate Orphanage. So he's being kicked out. Stubbs won't let him take anything. The guild even confiscates the die that Christopher got as a birthday gift the previous day. So he can't even take his birthday present because it's being deemed as property of the guild, and apprentices don't have belongings. They are not allowed to own things. So again, the guild takes it and they will decide who gets this die later, because Stubbs was claiming he was trying to steal it, and he even went so far as to say that Ashcombe and his men needed to search him to see if he's taken anything else, which makes Christopher concerned because he still has that page from the ledger that he ripped out that he's hiding. Thankfully, the three guild members kind of stare down Nathaniel Stubbs, basically saying, no, that is not right. We are not strip searching this kid. You need to know your place too, Nathaniel. This isn't your shop. Yes, we will decide the future of this place. We will go to Benedict Blackthorn's will, and it will be decided, at the next guild meeting. But, you are not dictating actions either. And you are out of line for saying that Christopher needed to be strip searched, because Christopher at that point was thinking, are they going to take my clothes and they're going to kick me out into the streets naked? But thankfully, Christopher has a place to land, albeit he is not welcomed by all at the place, but he crashes at his friend Thomas's place. His dad, who we found out he is a real nasty piece of work too, well, he threatened that he was going to throttle Christopher and said, go to the church over there. They'll take needy people. And it was Thomas's mom that said to her husband, William, said, stop. We need to do the good Christian thing. Christopher, come into the home. And so William can't throttle Christopher, so he decides to smack Tom in the head. So Christopher feels bad that now Tom's getting a little rough. So Christopher is going to crash with Thomas's family for the time being. So he at least has a roof over his head until he meets with the guild council. And they are working on the code, breaking the code on that ledger page. They had worked out a cipher to translate the first line, which the first line didn't make a whole lot of sense to them. It basically was translated to say, "Hews forth below the lions the gates of paradise," which didn't make a whole lot of sense to them. And they are working on translating the last line, which had a lot of numbers and ended with the phrase "end swords." So they had created their cipher that each letter corresponds with one of the numbers on the line to be able to fill in what this phrase is going to be. And we ended with basically both of them sitting back in their chairs, and we ended chapter 12 with Tom saying, "What does that mean?" So we're already given the hint that it doesn't make sense what they just translated with the cipher. So we open up chapter 13 with this line. I stared at it. I don't know. So I will show you guys. Here is the translation. As you can tell, it's a bunch of letters, but none of them make words that they understand. At least I don't, and I'm sure you guys are like, what the heck? Well, let's find out. Tom scratched his head. Is it in Latin? It can't be, I said. There is no letter J in Latin, and no letter U either. Maybe this is another code, like you said. Maybe this one's really, really secret. Another code did make sense. But how do I decipher it? Where is the key? Well, maybe those symbols mean something at the beginning. So here are those symbols at the very beginning. Looks like we have the cross and the triangle. Is that a cross? He said. I peered at it. I think it's a sword. A sword. Oh! Tom pointed at the end of the second line. There, end swords. There's another sword. A sword, a triangle, another sword. He used fourth, lions and gates, and a jumble of unreadable letters. That was the message, and I didn't understand any of it. Master Benedict had taught me backward writing the very first summer I had joined him. He knew I figured out the number code for the gunpowder recipe, and he pointedly stuck the lemon juice in my face. He obviously expected me to decipher this message, but now I didn't know what to do. I slumped back into my chair. Tom put a hand on my shoulder. Don't worry, you'll figure it out. Master Benedict believed in you. I felt like throwing up. I helped Tom finish scrubbing the back step before his father had returned. Tom kept up a chatter, but I wasn't listening. I was thinking about what he had said before. When the guild council threw me out of my home, I had wanted to run to Hugh right away. The last line in Master Benedict's message had stopped me. Tell no one. When I had first seen that page in the ledger, I thought Master Benedict had left it behind to name his killers. Now, after what Tom and I had deciphered, I wasn't so sure that was the case. Something else was hidden beneath these codes. That's what puzzled me. Codes were designed to fool strangers, as they fooled Lord Ashcombe. Hugh was no stranger. He had been Master Benedict's apprentice, too. He had deciphered this message faster than I ever could. So why not tell me to go see him? I shook my head. Hugh couldn't be in the cult of the Archangel. He wasn't a killer. I was sure of it. Master Benedict would have warned me. Then again, maybe he did. Tell no one. I finished scrubbing and sat on the step. I didn't have a choice. Hidden in the message was something that mattered more to Master Benedict than his own life. It meant everything to him. To decipher it, I needed Hugh's help. I decided I wouldn't tell Hugh about the message. I'd talk around it instead. Maybe mention one of the symbols. Say I saw it in a book or something. I had to take a chance. Whatever his fourth was, Hugh Cogswell was the only one who knew what it meant. Hugh didn't have a shop. While still with Master Benedict, Hugh had become friends with Nicholas Lang, an apprentice in the Royal College of Physicians. According to my master, the two had spent almost as much time together as Tom and I did. They both became journeymen the same year. Both married nearly identical girls. Both became masters a few years after that. As a physician, Dr. Lang needed someone to fill his patients' prescriptions, so he contracted his friend Hugh as his exclusive apothecary. That way, Dr. Lang got a trusted preparer of medicaments. And Hugh, who had loved every minute of my master's workshop and hated every minute in the store, never had to stand behind a counter ever again. So it's a nice little setup that Hugh's got. All he has to do is make the medicines for his friend Dr. Lang. Dr. Lang prescribes it, Hugh makes it, and his patients pick it up. He doesn't have to run a shop. So a little bit different than his previous employment with Master Benedict. That the contract brought Hugh a lot of money didn't hurt either. His home on Chelsea Street, the next door to Nicholas Lang's, was narrow, but of quality. It was solid brick and tall, a story higher than most of its neighbors. His workshop was on the ground floor, with the living quarters on the 3 floors above. Tom and I reached his door, brightly shackled oak banded with a curled wrought iron frame. Though it was growing dark and there were no lights in the house, not even from the fireplace, Tom peered in the window. Is he not home? I knocked. There was no response. I knocked again, harder. A door opened, but not the one I was in front of. From the house beside us stepped Dr. Lang, accompanied by his wife, both dressed for a night on the town. Dr. Lang! I ran over to catch him before he stepped into the carriage waiting at the end of the path. Dr. Lang! He turned, pushed his long brown wig away from his eyes. Yes, he wagged a finger, trying to place me. Christopher Rose, sir, said Benedict Blackthorne's apprentice. We met last Christmas at his shop. Yes, of course, he frowned. I'm glad I ran into you. Have you seen Hugh? No, I said, surprised. I was actually just going to ask you that very same question. Lang huffed. I haven't. I'm quite cross about it, actually. Hugh was to join us for supper on Oak Apple Day, and he left us all waiting. Our lamb was cold. He said it like he had been forced to swallow hemlock. Worse, I had several prescriptions to be filled today. I had to send my patients to that idiot on Cornhill instead. He's not with Mr. Blackthorne? Obviously, Dr. Lang hadn't heard the news just yet. I just shook my head. I haven't seen Master Hugh since Thursday. Since Thursday, then. He stroked his beard. So this is Dr. Lang. Yes, that sounds about right. We had breakfast on Ascension Day. If he's gone to see his wife without informing me, I'll plant my boot on his backside. He poked a finger at me, and when you see him, you tell him that. I stomped on the cobbles as we walked back to Tom's house. Tom wouldn't meet my eyes. Master Hugh didn't do it, I said. Tom held up his hands. I didn't say anything. I can read your mind. All right, Tom said. I believe you. But then where is he? Maybe it was as Dr. Lang said. Hugh's wife couldn't stand the noise and the smell of the city. She often spent months away with their 2 daughters at Hugh's country house. Maybe he'd gone to be with his family. I remember the conversation I overheard Thursday night. He was worried Simon's already fled the city. Oh, so that's their other friend that fled to Paris. Master Benedict resigned. Do you want to leave too? And then my master was attacked. Maybe that pushed Hugh over the edge, so he ran away. But then when he convinced Master Benedict to leave with him? Well, no, Master Benedict wanted to stay, and of all of my master's qualities, easily persuaded was not one of them. Shook my head. If Hugh had already left London, then I had no way of finding out what my master's message meant. We got to Tom Street, but instead of going down it, Tom took us through the narrow alley that led behind his house. His mother was waiting at the back door, a burlap sack in her hand. Did you break the news to Master Cogswell? She asked. He wasn't home, I said. That's a shame. It's always better to hear this sort of thing from friends. She handed the sack to Tom. Dinner in 5 minutes. Tom stopped me from following her into the house. We have to wait. For what? Inside the sack was half a loaf of crusty bread, a hard rye, and a few sweet buns. Is this what we're eating? No, he nodded toward the end of the path. A man turned into view. From a distance, he looked as if he was well off, which was odd, because while this wasn't a bad street, it also wasn't the kind of place you'd find a wealthy man strolling through the alleys. But when he got closer, I saw that he wasn't what I thought at all. His clothes had once been fine, but not anymore. His wig was a bird's nest. His thin wool jacket was ragged and frayed at the edges. His shirt had become so stained, its original color had long been forgotten. And his soft doe leather breeches had worn so thin that you could see his knees. This was Dr. Perret. He used to come to our shop. Then last summer, his house burned down. He hadn't repaired it. He hadn't moved out either. He still lived there alone among the charred timbers and ashes of his former life. Wow, that's kind of sad. Pleasant evening, Dr. Parrott, Tom said. Pleasant evening, Tom. And to you. He cocked his head as if he were listening to something. Christopher, He came closer. He hadn't washed his body any more than he had washed his clothes. Good to see you again, sir, I said. He looked at me sadly. I am so sorry about your master, lad. If you need anything, my home is yours for as long as you need to stay, and James would love the company. I felt my spine freeze. James, Dr. Parrott's 12-year-old son, had died in that fire. That's very kind, I stammered. Tom held out the sack. Here you go, sir. Bread and sweet buns. That'll please James, Dr. Parrott said. He adores your sweet buns. It's a task to get him to eat anything else. He tapped a torn pocket. I'm afraid I forgot to bring my coin purse again. I could go and... Don't worry, Tom said. I'll put it on your account like usual. Dr. Parrott took the sack with a trembling hand. He held it to his chest like a baby. Thank you, he said quietly. See you Monday. We watched him go. On our way inside, Tom put a hand on my arm. Don't tell my father, he said. Yeah, his father, William, probably would throttle him for giving away a loaf of bread and some sweet buns that they could have sold in the shop. Tom called for his sisters. Within a second, the 5 of them came thundering down the stairs. Then we sat down for dinner. Under different circumstances, I would have savored the beef, roasted to perfection with pepper and sage. But with every bite, Tom's father pinched his lips as if I were eating his future. I couldn't stop thinking about poor Dr. Parrott. It scared me. I had lost everything, too. A year later, would that be me? Living among my own life's rubble, begging for scraps, imagining Master Benedict was still alive? After dinner, Tom and I were ordered to clean the table and scour the pots. Normally, the Bailey girls would have been assigned their own task, but Tom's father seemed to feel he'd get his money's worth out of my staying there if I did all the chores. Free from their usual duties, the girls decided to hang around the kitchen and use us for their own amusement. Cecilia, delighted at this turn of events, decided that she'd be taskmaster. She kept up a steady stream of orders as we worked, telling us how this pot needed more scrubbing and how that pot should be scraped just so. Plump and cherry Isabel sat on the countertop, swinging her legs under her frilled orange petticoat and clattering away at us. Something about a duck who had a sheep for a friend, not seeming to care whether anyone was listening or not. The other 3, Catherine, Emma, and little Molly, found a ball of yarn and played some game called Stick Talk. I don't really know what the rules were, but the girls appeared to score points each time the ball hit me or Tom. Double if it bounced off of our heads. That sounds like the kind of game sisters would play. As Tom and I finished with the pots, the 3 youngest girls clamped onto our legs and declared I was their prisoner and refused to let me go until I paid for my freedom with a story. So upstairs we went to the girls' bedroom, where the Baileys kept their only book, a dog-eared copy of Le Morte d'Arthur. We all piled into Cecilia's bed as I opened the cover. Cecilia, sitting behind me, seemed more interested in braiding feathers into my hair than listening to the story. Isabel amused herself by smearing rouge on my cheeks and giggling a lot. The other 3 listened, ears prickled like wolves as I read them the tale of King Arthur and the giant of Mont Saint Michel. The giant terrorized the countryside, killing its people and pillaging the lands until the villagers begged King Arthur to save them. Molly, the youngest at 4 years old, hid her face in my lap as the giant ate 12 children like roast chickens on a spit. And she and gentle Emma both clutched at my waist during the final battle when the 2 rolled down the hill to the sea until the great king of Britain smote the monster with his dagger. Cecilia leaned her slender frame against mine, her head on the back of my neck. I wish he were here, she said sadly. King Arthur? I said. Uh-huh. She rested her chin on my shoulder and locked her arms around my chest. He'd stop the cult of the Archangel. Then they wouldn't have hurt your master, she sighed. But I guess he's just a story. She held on to me as Molly and Emma turned to the next page in the book, pleading with me to keep reading. Tom, watching from the doorway, hushed them and tucked them in. That's enough sport for one day. You'll get another tale tomorrow. Tom and I blew out the candles and went outside, sitting on the well-scrubbed step in the back alley. Tom handed me a woolen rag so I could wipe the rouge off of my cheeks. As I did, he kept looking at me out of the corner of his eye. What? I said. He sighed. So what are you getting me into this time? What do you mean? I've seen that look in your eyes before. I don't suppose I could have kept this one inside. Cecilia was right. King Arthur was just a story. No one was coming to save me. That didn't mean I had to let everything I cared about get taken away. I might not know how to solve Master Benedict's riddle, but I did know what I could do tonight. The cult of the Archangel took my master. The Apothecaries Guild Council now took my home. I had only one thing left on my mind, my puzzle cube. And I'd burned in the pits of hell before I'd let anyone take that, too. Let's see, how long is this chapter? All right, I'll get you one more chapter today, guys. Chapter 14. This is madness, Tom hissed. You said that already, I whispered. And yet here we are, still doing it. So if you don't mind, this is madness. He had a point. Sneaking through the alleys of London at midnight wasn't the smartest idea in the world. At best, you'd meet a parade of drunks. At the worst, you wouldn't see sunrise. If you ran into a parish constable on the patrol, he was likely to crack your skull as question you, since he just assumed you were up to no good. No lanterns hung in the streets. City regulations forbade them after 9 p.m. There were torch boys you could hire to light your own way, but that obviously wasn't an option for us. We traveled instead by the half moon, which cast the city in a foggy silver glow. Fortunately, my home wasn't far, just 3 streets away from Tom's. They're going to break back into Blackthorn's shop, I think, guys. We dodged behind the clattering cart of the night soil men, bolted through one more alley, then hopped a stone fence, and we were outside Blackthorn's shop at the back. How are we getting in? Tom said. I thought the guild council took your key. They had, except they didn't know about my Master Benedict, about the key Master Benedict had kept hidden. I hadn't told them where to find it. At the back corner of the house, a column of cracked brick led up the side of a chimney. I dragged my finger along, feeling for the symbol. I found it etched near the eye height on the left side, camouflaged in the brick's natural pattern. So he was feeling for this symbol, guys. Tom cocked his head. Isn't that a planet? He was right. This was the symbol for Mars. I wondered why Master Benedict had used it to mark his key. I was still thinking about it when a frenzied fluttering burst in front of my face. I jumped. Tom gave a little squeak I didn't know a boy his size could make. My heart started up again when I saw it was just a pigeon. It flapped its wings and landed next to me. In the moonlight, it took me a moment to recognize her. Bridget! She cooed. I knelt and scooped her into my hand. She nuzzled against my fingers. What are you doing out here? I said. Tom pointed upward. Look. Right above us, at the edge of the roof, the door on our pigeon coop swung open in the breeze. I cursed. Whatever idiot the guild council had sent to feed the pigeons hadn't latched it behind him, all our birds would be gone, and out in the wild Bridget could have been hurt. She wriggled in my fingers, alarmed by my voice. I stopped swearing and stroked her feathers to calm her. She still managed to look offended. Tom looked around nervously. We can't stay out here all night, he said. Right again, I cradled Bridget and birds, hadn't even secured the house when he left. I was about to start swearing again, but when we went in the corner, gave a fight to see the damage. Pots and cooked like garbage. Ceramic jars were overturned, leaving rainbow powder starbursts on the floorboards. Even the ice vault in the floor was open. The precious chip chunks left exposed to melt. Wasn't until Bridget made a strangled cry that I realized I was squeezing her. Tom tugged on my sleeve. We need to go. I couldn't. Against Tom's urging, I went forward, trembling, into the shop. I expected bad. I got even worse. Half of the jars were off the shelves, some tipped over, some shattered, herbs and powders blown everywhere. Here, too, the books were torn apart, pages fallen across the room like the ink-stained blanket of snow. Even the stuffed animals hadn't been spared. Every one was sliced open, straw sprayed over the rest of the mess. My shoulders shook. The horrible, hateful monsters. Were they going to just destroy everything I cared about? For a moment, I wanted to collapse, but I didn't break my promise. I just wiped my eyes and stamped the swell back down, let it fuel the anger inside. My master's sash lay in the corner, partly covered in blackberry leaves. I dropped the key on the counter and put Bridget there, too. I picked up the sash. It still smelled faintly of Egyptian incense, reminding me ever more of him. I shook the leaves away and wrapped it around my vest. It held me tight. I hadn't returned for this, but I wasn't going to leave it. Not now. I tied it over my shirt, then I searched through the wreckage, fingers sifting through the multicolored grains until I finally spotted what I came for. Hidden on the floor under a cinder bar. My puzzle box. My birthday gift from Master Benedict. Mine. I held it, letting its weight press into my palm. For one small moment, it felt like everything was all right again. Should she be eating that? Tom said. I turned. Bridget on the counter was pecking away at a pile of fine white crystals. Bridget, no! I ran over. She marched away, flapping her wings. I dipped a finger in the powder and touched it to the end of my tongue. It tasted sweet and breathed a sigh of relief. It was only sugar. Harmless, thank goodness. Though I imagined what Master Benedict would say if he caught me feeding valuable sugar to a pigeon. That's when it hit me. It was valuable. Sugar, blackberry leaves, saltpeter, cinnabar, apothecary ingredients traded for a fortune at the market. Even if the burglars didn't understand what all the goods were worth, we had jars of powdered gold and silver, obvious prizes to be taken. Instead, we stood in a king's ransom scattered like sand. Then I realized something else. It was the dry ingredients that littered the shop. Powders, minerals, leaves, all of them. Not one of the jars left on the shelf contained something solid, and none of the jars with liquid had been touched. Books torn apart, stuffed animals shredded, dry goods dumped. Whoever master something so valuable they're willing to throw away hundreds of pounds worth of ingredients just to find it. And they could read the labels on the jars. I jammed the puzzle cube under my master's sash and picked up Bridget. We need to go. Tom sounded exacerbated. That's what I said. He left, jogging toward the back door, workshop door. I followed him, then ran straight into his back. Bridget squawked and ruffled her feathers. I stepped back, Tom frozen in place. What are you? I began, but he held his hands up, eyes wide. Then I heard it too. All right, guys, I am going to stop there. That'll be the end of chapter 14. We will pick right back up with chapter 15 tomorrow. And like I said on Dojo, on our class story, like last week, I'm going to try to do 1 o'clock as our read aloud time. So if you want to catch it live, I will make every effort to be live at 1 o'clock to be able to come on and read to you guys. So if you need to get caught up on the videos, please visit the channel. I have all the past read alouds saved on there. So if there's a day that you missed, you can be able to find it. I have started with the last few weeks. I've started putting the dates with the video titles as kind of a way to help students and families kind of navigate. Like, you know, if you missed last Friday, I have last Friday's dated, so you'll be able to find it pretty easy now. But my hope is that we'll be able to finish this book by our last day of school. So, guys, this might be the last book that I read to you guys for the school year. But I'll let you guys in on something I am planning. I did grab quite a stack of books from the classroom when the school let me and some of the staff back into our classrooms to grab things. I find that since we are in this quarantine, and I am not sure how long they're going to have us staying in our homes, but it definitely sounds like summer is not going to be the normal summer that most of us are accustomed to, or probably not going to be allowed to go to certain places. I am thinking about maybe continuing doing these read aloud videos into the summer as kind of a way for you guys to kind of do something where we can still do something together, and it could be a story that you guys can still hear throughout the summer. So that's kind of the idea that I'm kicking around. Figured I'd let you guys know about that, even though that's still weeks and weeks away, but I would imagine it's going to be here before we know it. It's been kind of the weird thing with this whole quarantine and social distancing. Time seems to be, at least my perception of time, has been weird. It seems like we have been in this quarantine forever, but at the same time is flying by, even though it seems like it is taking forever. But anyway, that's enough of my rambling. So thank you so much for joining me today for this read aloud, and I will catch you guys on the next one. See you later, guys. Enjoy your Monday.